Okay, so I first wanted to talk about what we learned in class about domestic violence, interpersonal violence, and relationship violence. I guess some notes that I wrote down are says that students think it's okay to talk about sexual assault or drugs or whatever when they come into college, and they bring their norm with them to college, and they kind of share what messed up things they've been through, and they might think it's okay to still do those things in college, and they probably think it's still normal, but it's really not. And maybe those things that the students bring into the school, they share them, and they think they can form a group and change people. I don't know. But I also learned that there's a secondary trauma. It doesn't only affect the victim, but it affects the victim's friends or whoever the victim told about it. So I learned that there's an actual name for that. And that I guess I feel more comfortable knowing what to say to those people who are victims, and that I don't feel as uncomfortable as I would before learning about all of this, and how to talk to them, and how to tell them they're brave for telling people or coming out about it, and that we can recognize how hard of a struggle it was keeping it in, because it might be hard for them to talk to someone that they don't know about something that harsh. And I learned that they can feel guilty about it. Well, I guess I already knew that, but just knowing different things about why they feel guilty, and that's kind of harsh, knowing they feel guilty about something that they couldn't control, and that they blame themselves thinking that they deserved it, and they didn't, obviously, but not telling them that they shouldn't blame themselves, but just listening. And yeah, but there's a lot of different, I learned that there's a lot of different reasons why they self-blame themselves, or why they don't tell people, because it might be a family that didn't want them to tell, the victim didn't want to say anything because it was a family member doing it to them, or they wanted to protect themselves in court, and they didn't want the person to come after them again if they found out that they told someone about it. So there's a lot of different ways why they wouldn't come out about what happened. But on to the questions of what stood out to me the most about this domestic violence discussion was the silent witness organization. That's the thing where the cutouts, I think it really stood out. The cutouts really stood out because they're of past people that were alive, and they tell a story because they have their actual story of what happened. And it's an organization where they get together every once in a while, and anyone can go, and they just tell an alive person tells the story about the dead person pretending to be them. And I think it really will catch people's attention and make people think how much the community cares or tries to care about the horrible things that happen with domestic violence, and how they try to help the family and the community, or the victims' friends and family. But number two, what was difficult to understand about this domestic violence guess it was difficult to understand why guys or girls can feel so violent towards like people who may be like vulnerable, and I guess like what makes them think it's right to do these things, and why do they think it's like, why do they think that way, and then why do they think it's like the victim's fault after they just got doing like all of the wrongful things. It's obviously not the victim's fault, and it's kind of crazy. Like, I don't understand why people think that way. But yeah. And how did it compare to the Alice training? I guess I think that both of the talks were very emotional, but knowing the different ways we can protect ourselves from these different violences in the world, I guess makes me feel somewhat more protective, like, of myself, and because I have like more knowledge about all these things in different ways, and I guess it's only helpful to talk about these horrible things that go on in the world, and because now we know what to do with them or about them. So yeah, only talking will help more, and figuring out like what we can do to not only like help the victims but just help the people who think it's okay to do all of these things. Yep.